We've all heard of King Arthur, the magic sword, the round table, the wizard Merlin. But here's the truth. History was never that kind. There was no fairy tale. Only a brutal past the world chose to romanticize and forget. In 5th century Britain, the Roman Empire had collapsed. Chaos ruled. Saxon invaders burned everything in their path. And from that collapse, a silent warrior rose. A general, not a king. A man we now call King Arthur. But that was never his real name. They say he led the British at the Battle of Badon, a real fight that held back the Saxons. But no one ever wrote down his name. No statue, no crown, just a legend born from silence. And a war the world pretended never happened. They say it wasn't a king who stood on that hill, but a nameless general. The year was around 500 AD. Britain torn between collapsing order and invading Saxon chaos. No crown, no throne. Just mud, blood, and a will to survive he didn't ride into glory. He walked through the dark with a rusted blade. The Roman legions were gone, but one man still fought like they were watching. Locals whispered his name in fear, not reverenced. He wasn't born for myth, he was buried by history. The Battle of Badon wasn't a tale, it was a last stand. They held the Saxons back, not with magic, but with blood. They say he led them that day, not as a king, but as a shield. No records, no songs, just silence where his story should have lived. Who was he, and why was he? Forgotten? If it really was Arthur, history owes him more than legend. This wasn't fantasy. This was a real war, and it was nearly lost. But the question still echoes. Was Mount Badon his victory or his disappearance? Was he the man who stopped the Saxons, or just the first they couldn't kill? The story doesn't end here. In the next chapter, the silence speaks louder than the myth. There's a quiet hill in Somerset where the earth feels older than time. Locals call it Cadbury Castle, but some believe it was once Camelot. Not the legend, the real one. Beneath the grass lie stones that whisper of walls, hulls, and warriors who once stood there. In the 1960s, archaeologists dug deep, and what they found didn't belong to myth. Massive timber halls, Romane rapotri defensive walls. It wasn't magic. It was strategy. The fort had been rebuilt stronger, as if someone expected war. Maybe Arthur didn't build Camelot to rule, but to survive. Maybe it wasn't a palace, but a shield. The myth of Camelot speaks of glory. But the ground here tells of fire, defense, urgency. Camelot was real, but it wasn't a dream. It was desperation. They say Arthur's court sat in a circle to show no one stood above the rest. That idea didn't start with poetry. It started with survival. Camelot wasn't gold. It was oak, mud, and blood. A war council more than a kingdom. A last defense, not a fairy tale, that if Cadbury Castle truly was Camelot, then history didn't forget Arthur. It just buried him. Long before myths took over, Arthur's name appeared in ink, not poetry. The Historia Brittonum, written in the 9th century, didn't call him a king. It called him a warrior who fought 12 brutal battles, 12 fights, one man, no throne. Then came the Annals Cambrai, a Welsh chronicle. It says Arthur fought at the Battle of Badon and died at Camelot. No magic, just blood, loss, and silence. Neither source mentions Camelot. No Merlin, no Excalibur, just a man at war, written down centuries before the legends grew. Some historians believe the writers merged real memories with fading oral stories. What survives is part record, part riddle. But why name Arthur if he wasn't real? Who was he to echo across centuries? Ink doesn't survive without weight. The texts don't glorify. They list. They document. Arthur wasn't sung about. He was filed away like a weapon never fully used. What matters isn't just what they wrote, but that they wrote it at all. In the 2nd century, Rome sent Sarmatian cavalry to Britain, foreign warriors from the steppes, armored and unyielding. Centuries later, legends of King Arthur emerged, bearing symbols eerily like theirs. Dragons, round tables, magical swords. Coincidence or echo? Some believe Arthur wasn't British at all, but descended from these exiled soldiers. Outsiders turned protectors in a collapsing world. There was a Roman commander named Lucius Artorius Castus, stationed in Britain. Similar name, similar story. Could his life have sparked the legend? The Sarmatians carried curved swords, fought in tight formations, and believed in spiritual prophecy. That's not fantasy. That's field history. Their unit survived in Britain for generations, long enough for memories to become myths, long enough for one name to outlive the others. Maybe Arthur wasn't a single man, but a line of soldiers standing against the tide, one after another, until one was remembered. Sometimes history doesn't lie. It just speaks with an accent we forgot how to understand. There are no 5th century records that prove Arthur ever lived. No signature, no statue, no confirmed grave. And yet his name is everywhere. That's not fiction. That's cultural memory. King Arthur became what people needed. A symbol of unity in a broken land. Writers in later centuries shaped him into a hero, a king, a savior. But perhaps that legend began with a soldier, quiet, real, and forgotten. The man may have disappeared, but the idea of Arthur refused to die. In every crisis, his story returned. Not as fact, but as hope. Arthur didn't need to be real to matter. He became a mirror of loyalty, of strength, of resistance against darkness. Today, historians argue over evidence. But the people remember him not in dates. They remember him in silence, in longing. The real history of Arthur may never be fully uncovered, but sometimes stories are truer than facts, because Arthur was never just a man. He was what we needed him to be, and maybe he still is.